wrestled so many of the top names in NXT. How are you preparing to take on Pat McAfee?
Yeah, this one is so different. Like, so it's so bizarre because I'm coming off of a run with the NXT Championship. Being the longest reigning NXT champion of all time. And again, being the NXT champion means I'm constantly defending against the best of the best in the pro wrestling world. Just having guys who have been wrestling for a long time, or even if they haven't, just incredibly skilled at the profession, coming after my championship. So this one, to go from losing that to literally fighting a guy who has never wrestled before is very, very different. This is not at all what I expected I would be doing at TakeOver 30. Now it's exactly what I want to be doing, considering everything that has kind of gone down with us. So as far as preparing, I mean, for me, I've been preparing to be the best version of myself for over 12 years now. So there's not much that I've changed as far as what I'm looking to do to Pat McAfee, because he's just not going to be able to hang at the level that I've delivered for quite some time now. I think Pat is in way over his head. I think there's a small part of some people that admire his confidence and admire his ability to come across as not being nervous, not being afraid. But when he eventually, if he even shows up, when he eventually is in the ring at TakeOver 30, like one of the biggest takeovers of all time, and he realizes that he's not sitting behind the commentary table and he's actually in the ring with the guy who has carried the brand for years now, he's going to realize he's in way over his head. So my goal is very simple. I want to embarrass Pat. I'm going to make Pat really tired, and I'm going to make him gain a whole new level of respect for what I do that he hadn't previously done before. So for me, TakeOver 30 is going to be really fun. It may not look like I'm having fun in there. It may look like I'm really angry, but I'm going to be having fun deep down inside.
So I think for a lot of people, you have come across as a good guy in this situation. And over here in the UK, Pat McAfee's not someone that we're really familiar with outside of him coming to WWE. So for people that don't know him that well, what makes him so unlikable?
Yeah, so my best example of that, well, first of all, okay, Pat McAfee as an athlete, even though I don't like the guy, he's very impressive. He had an amazing career in whatever he's decided to do. Now he has a podcast as well. But what makes Pat unlikable? I remember I first met Pat over 2 years ago, and he was at an NXT show. And I remember, he was involved in a match of mine, of course, that I didn't prefer or like. But the real reason that I didn't like Pat was his attitude from the gate. Like, Pat McAfee walks into a room and he acts like he owns the place. Like, he had never met a lot of us before. He was coming into our house and our world, and instead of being respectful, instead of being appreciative, again, he walks around with his chest puffed out. He's loud. He's obnoxious. He feels like he can say whatever he wants to say to whoever he wants to say it to. Pat has always been a loudmouth. And then kind of what took me over the edge, once again, I won't super get into this, but the interview that I did with Pat, where I took time away from my family to go and speak to him, just those constant jabs that you saw, for anyone who saw the interview that I did with Pat, that's just how he is all the time. And for so many times, people would treat it as like Pat would act that way, and then he would leave the room, and then everyone would talk about how annoying he is. And on that day, I was just like, I'm not going to wait to talk about how much this guy drives me nuts when I'm done speaking to him. I'm going to tell him how I feel. So that was pent up for a really, really long time. But just once again, for anybody who doesn't know, that brash attitude that you've seen, that is him 24/7. So it just, depending on the day, it was the wrong day for me.
Well, speaking about that interview, that got a lot of buzz. You had so many people talking about what was real, what wasn't. In this modern era, are you surprised it got people talking that much?
So yes and no. I didn't think about it in the sense of, so I understand the surprise for anybody who's seen interviews of mine for quite some time. For example, I think generally speaking, I pride myself on being someone who is professional throughout interviews. So the fact that I quote unquote wasn't professional in that scenario, I understand why that that created a lot of attention. But at the same time, I think the reason it grabbed so many people is people have kind of known that me and Pat have been at each other for a while. And even there for a minute, I think there were times where I've never liked Pat. He's never really liked me. But some of the interaction was kind of in a playful, jesting, like, okay, we know the camera's on. Let's kind of be goofy. That one, there was just no regard for. It was like I didn't even recognize there was a camera there. But I think the interest and the intrigue of it building up the way that it did. I think the fact I was shouting the way that it did. I think the fact that so many people who maybe didn't follow NXT saw the interview. I think that was intriguing to people. So it just happened to be caught by a bunch of outlets that maybe don't cover wrestling or don't cover me. So then it just kind of grew like wildfire. And there were people, once again, who quite a few people who had seen that interview have never seen me wrestle and had no idea who I was. So I think that just created this wildfire of intrigue amongst people. So yes and no, I was surprised at how well it caught. But also it didn't surprise me either, because I could see why people thought that it was a wild interview. So.
Well, despite the dislike for Pat, can you see the benefit that he can bring to NXT and getting more attention on you?
Yeah, so at the end of the day, I do want what's best for NXT, and of course, I want what's best for myself. And I do recognize that he's a guy that does bring a lot of attention, a lot of outside attention, maybe for people who haven't watched NXT before. So I recognize the benefit of that. But again, I'm an emotional and passionate 31-year-old man who sometimes can't help himself, and I get very defensive of what I've done and what I've accomplished, and more importantly, I get defensive of pro wrestling and NXT and what we've done. So as cool as it is, maybe on paper that Pat McAfee could bring some different eyes and different people into checking out NXT, or maybe checking out NXT TakeOver, I still stand by the fact that when this is over, I want him to recognize that, again, he's in way over his head and he doesn't belong here. So if a couple people end up tuning in and saying, hey, that NXT show was really cool, then that's just icing on the cake. But my main goal is just to make Pat McAfee regret this decision in every way, shape, and form.
So talking about the disrespect of Pat show and these new acts that will be on it, for people that know nothing about wrestling and tuning in, what do you want people like that to know about the realities of being a wrestler? And in your own life, if you've met people that know nothing about wrestling and you tell them you're a wrestler, you're Adam Cole, what is it that you want to convey to them about the reality of it?
That's an excellent question, by the way.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah. So I love this question because there is so much to pro wrestling that I think so many people who don't watch it actually don't understand. So the job itself is incredibly challenging. Obviously, as people can see, it's very physically demanding. But at the same time, there's so many different aspects to the show of pro wrestling that make it such a challenge. First of all, performing in front of, whether it's 500 people, 5,000, or 50,000 people, your job as a wrestler is to keep those people entertained for as long as possible and have them go through this roller coaster ride of emotions. So obviously, as far as cardiovascular, it's very exhausting. You need to have your strength up. The pain that your body goes through, like that, there's this misconception. I think that's changed now a little bit, but the wrestling ring is not a trampoline, or it's not a pillow. It's a little bit of padding and then a lot of spring and wood and metal. It's demanding. And it's very, very hard on your body. But at the end of the day, we want to take people through this emotional, exhilarating adrenaline rush of a roller coaster ride and have them leaving going, oh my God, that was so much fun. To me, a great wrestling show makes you laugh at one point. It makes you jump for joy. It makes you so angry that you want to tell your friends, oh my God, I hate this so much. It's a entire like pot and mixture of all these different emotions. But then as far as what we do as well, again, aside from the physical aspects of it, the mental pressure of knowing that you're going out on live television every week, and you don't get a redo. You got to get it once, and you got to get it right. The travel is one thing that a lot of people don't talk about either, but just the exhaustion of needing to go from town to town or country to country and place to place at the end of the day, and then be on and be ready to perform because people paid money to come and see you and come to be entertained. So it's one of the craziest jobs in the world, but to me, it's the most absolutely rewarding, amazing job, because at the most beneficial and the most important thing is, so many times I've met fans, and I was one of these fans at one point too, where someone will come up to you and say, hey, I was going through a really rough time or a really rough patch in my life, and your matches or this show that you did really got me through this really rough time. The people do look at certain pro wrestlers as superheroes, or people that they really look up to and they admire. And that's a very powerful thing in a positive way. So pro wrestling is really wonderful. It really, really is. And people can just kind of go for a second and, check their worries at the door and just go have a great time and either boo the crap out of somebody or cheer and jump for joy for somebody else. So it's really cool.
Now, one of the things that Pat did say about you that was rather mean was regarding your height. So when you were first getting into wrestling, and even when you were a kid watching, did you ever feel that your height would hold you back? And how have you seen that change? Because I feel like that's changed. I feel like height doesn't matter anymore.
Oh yeah. So to answer the first part of your question, it was absolutely something I was worried about. Yeah, I was terrified. That's why I think I always, even watching, I remember watching independent wrestling for the first time, and that like really reinvigorated my confidence going forward. Cause I'm like, okay, some of these guys who are amazing, not all of them are 6'4" or 265 pounds. Some of these guys are smaller, and look, these fans adore them and they love them and they're so talented and so skilled. And then you'd see those guys move on and end up in the WWE. So it 100% was something I was a little bit worried about up front. And then of course, even before I started wrestling, whether it was kids at my high school or, even, people in my family saying like, oh, you want to pursue pro wrestling, you should be a lot bigger. How are you going to be able to do that? You're definitely not big enough to do that. So I use that as kind of like motivation up front, but it is something that I have heard pretty much my entire career. But one thing I was very proud of is up until recently with the kind of the resume that I've had is I try to get people to forget or not even really think about how tall I am. It's the way that I, try to carry myself, the way that my credentials and my matches kind of speak for themselves, where it doesn't matter how tall somebody is, as long as they're being entertained and as long as they feel like they're lost in it and they believe what I'm saying and they believe what I'm doing. And I do think I've managed to kind of do that. But yeah, with Pat bringing it up, to me, he just sounded like the classic internet troll. Like to me, Pat bringing that up was proof that, okay, he can't knock my wrestling. He can't knock my interview skills. He can't knock my credentials. He can't knock the championship runs that I've had. He can't knock my success in any way, shape, or form. So of course he's going to the 10-year-old Twitter troll response of "you're not tall enough." To me, it encompasses exactly who he is and what he stands for. And it was embarrassing on his end. So again, caught me on a wrong day, but now more than ever, your height does not matter. If you're good, you're good. And wrestling fans appreciate that now. And I know that they gravitate towards people who are incredibly passionate about the job, give 100%, eat, sleep, and breathe this, and they're entertained by. So I'm glad that that's changed. I'm very, very glad that's changed.
We're on the 3-year anniversary of the Undisputed Era. What do you remember about that debut night, and how did you guys feel? Did you know that was going to click immediately?
So I was very excited. I remember first being brought into NXT and not really knowing what they were going to do with me. Actually, me, Bobby, and Kyle didn't really know for sure we were going to be put together until that day. We had heard like kind of rumblings, but I remember getting there that day and then it was discussed, about Kyle and Bobby coming out first and then me coming out through the crowd and us standing there together. So then it kind of clicked with us. We're like, oh, we're going to be a faction together, which we were very excited about. Like I've been in many ways married to Kyle O'Reilly since the start of my career. I met him in 2009, and we had a match together that kind of caught some internet buzz, and that kind of slingshotted our careers a little bit further, where we ended up getting signed to Ring of Honor at the same time. And we either wrestled with or against each other that entire stretch. So literally, I've been with him from the beginning. Bobby Fish was one as well that I had known for a really long time in ROH. Again, the exciting transition of going from the independents to WWE, specifically NXT, was awesome. But then to find out you're doing it with your buddies is so much better. Again, because that relationship that me, Kyle, and Bobby, and now Roddy, all of us have is very, very real. Like we all text each other every day. I was in their weddings. Like we're legit. We're a crew. We travel together. So to be together, but is the best. And no, I did not think that it was going to take off the way that it did. Like I was very excited, but I did not expect the Undisputed Era to turn into this just awesome crew that people really, really enjoy. So I was pumped.
And you've had so many accomplishments in NXT, and now you do no longer have the title. So what's left for you there to do?
Yeah. To me, there's a lot left for me to do. One of the things that I am really proud of with NXT is I love being a part of something that I feel like is in the middle of this crazy growth spurt. So when I first got to NXT, and to the transition of us moving to live on the USA Network every single week and truly solidifying ourselves as a third brand and kind of seeing more and more eyes get on NXT, I love being involved in that process. I love being involved in that crew. So as far as what we have left to do, I mean, aside from the fact of course, I want to get the NXT championship back. Of course, I want the Undisputed Era to get all the gold back and all that stuff. But as far as a whole, I want to be involved as NXT continues to solidify itself as not only the third brand of WWE, but the brand. I really believe in NXT that much. And I know our crew does as well. So, I just love being a part of it. I really do believe bell to bell NXT delivers the best pro wrestling that you can find anywhere. And I like being involved.
Recently, you've gone live, and you also have competition on Wednesday nights, and maybe some fans think things are changing a little bit with something like Pat McAfee coming in, or like what we saw last week with Keith Lee getting some fire in his face. What do you see has changed about the presentation, or do you still think that NXT is definitely the wrestling brand and that's where the focus truly lies?
Yeah, so I think as far as, competition, obviously, to me, first and foremost, and I know that the competition will agree that always makes things better and more interesting. You're forced in certain situations to somewhat, even if you don't pay attention a lot, but you're forced a little bit to pay attention as far as what the other one's doing. And again, I'm friends with a lot of those guys. So like if they have a killer night, I'm the first one to text them and be like, oh, that was awesome. But they're the same way with me. Like if I have a match that they really enjoy, they'll shoot me a text. Oh, that was great. And we love that. But generally speaking, and I know they feel this way too. So for me, I'm not able to multitask and focus on what they're doing when we're focused on what we're doing. We're focused on making sure our show is exciting or as good as possible. And I know they feel that way as well. I think what happens, though, is I think there comes a time where you get all these new characters in NXT. For example, a Karrion Kross. He's so different from anything that we've had in NXT before. So because he's so different, you start thinking outside the box of doing different things instead of, how we've treated a Keith Lee or how we've treated an Adam Cole or a Johnny Gargano. He's just such a different act. So because he's so different, once again, you'll find different ways to tell stories that you want to tell, which to me keeps the show really fresh. I like that you never know what's going to happen, especially when you bring in new characters. So again, I never in a million years thought that I would go from being the longest reigning champion to wrestling a guy like Pat McAfee at TakeOver 30. It's something so different from what I've done. But at the same time, and this is like anything in pro wrestling, some people love what's going on, and then some people don't like what's going on. And that's just the way that it goes, unfortunately. So all I know is that we're always trying to do the most exciting and the best stuff for our fans. We're trying to get as many eyes on NXT as possible, because we know if you decide to sit down and watch an NXT show, you're going to leave going, that was really fun. So I know that's our goal at the end of the day, but experimenting and seeing what works best for our brand is definitely most important, and just keeping things fresh and interesting.
It's obvious how much you love NXT, but if you get the call that it is time to leave and go to Raw or SmackDown, where do you see yourself in the Undisputed Era fitting in there? And who would be someone that might be your target going in?
Ooh, another good question. Yeah. So hypothetically, if we were to go to Raw or SmackDown, I do think me and the rest of Era could make a big impact. There's something about, again, it's 4 guys who to me are at the top of their game. We're in our primes right now. We're prepared for this. We had or are having one great run in NXT. So if we were to make that transition, I would like to think that we would be just as successful on Raw or SmackDown. As far as a target, for me personally, there's a guy named AJ Styles, who I have wrestled a handful of times, whether that be in Ring of Honor or on the Independents, and I've never walked out as the winner in that match. And on top of that, so I was a much different wrestler then. I feel like I've grown so much as a performer and as a pro wrestler that I would love the chance to get in there with AJ and show him how much I've improved. And more importantly, AJ to me is maybe the greatest of our generation. He's just incredibly talented, incredibly skilled. And I want an excuse to get in there and go toe to toe with him again. So AJ Styles is a guy I'd have my target on right away.
Cool, that would be awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time, Adam, and good luck with your match. Good luck with Pat.
Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate it.